From the New Arts and Media Studios in River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world, right here in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, everybody's still buzzing about the COVID relief bill that passed the Senate over the weekend. Now they got to dot some I's and cross some T's in the House. Something that won't be included. Did you hear about this? Man, the GOP. Whew, these guys. One of their new stars, Tommy Tuberville, Coach Tuberville from Alabama, his bright idea when they were having their little marathon weekend proposing amendments, well, he tried to slip in an amendment that would, quote, ensure that education funding in the bill is properly directed to schools who are focused on COVID response and recovery rather than pushing a liberal agenda. At least that was his his explanation. You want to hear what the amendment was? Here we go. To prohibit funds made to states, local education agencies, and institutions of higher education that permit any student whose biological sex is male to participate in an athletic program or activity designed for women or girls. So what's a bill unless we put some blatant bigotry in it? That was a proposed amendment. Of course it failed. But this is in the new era of the GOP, in the era of Tuberville and Boebert and Taylor Greene, this kind of garbage is back on the top of the heap as far as their priorities go. And there are bills all over the country right now in state legislatures where Republicans are doing everything they possibly can to enact bigoted laws against their favorite new boogeyman, and that's transgender women. We just can't be having transgender women exercising their freedoms. No, can't have that. This is just really, really disgusting. In case anybody needs to hear this, a transgender girl is a girl. A transgender woman is a woman. Period. And what's really frightening about this, it damn near passed, if not for Lisa Murkowski, because our good buddy Joe Manchin of West Virginia, I'll be so glad when he is just on to whatever's next for him. I can't have this guy anymore. He was the sole Democrat who voted for the amendment. So Lisa Murkowski swoops in to save the day as the sole Republican voting against the amendment, making the total 49-50. So it loses by a single damn vote. Tuberville is new to the Senate, just took his seat a few weeks ago. Self-proclaimed Christian conservative, claims that liberals in Washington are, quote, out of control. He's used the words sick and disgusting in his own social media regarding trans women. You guys, we cannot normalize this kind of stuff. These people have to make headlines. This kind of open bigotry anywhere in America is unacceptable. But from a United States senator, how this is okay, how this guy got elected, I'm just so disgusted by this. To the White House's credit, President Joe, I will say to their credit, they were asked about it. Well, at least Jen Psaki, the press secretary, was asked about it. Her answer, quote, the president believes that trans rights are human rights and that no one should be discriminated on the basis of sex. Not only is this the law of the land, it's his own deeply held view. Nobody jumps on Joe harder than I do, but he mostly says the right thing. And for a president, you have to at least say the right thing. As I hope we've all learned, president's words have power. So in this case, quoted by the press secretary, but same. No conditions, no pussyfooting, no political speak. Nope, flat out. This is a moral issue. Psaki was also asked about some legislation coming out of Mississippi. As I said there, I read somewhere, here it is, 37 bills have been proposed in state legislatures that would ban transgender girls and women from playing school sports. Mississippi's anti-trans sports bill has already passed the state's House and Senate and is expected to be signed by the Republican governor soon. By the way, I'm reading now from LGBTQNation.com. Well, Psaki was asked about this legislation and if President Joe had any opinion. She said that he hasn't spoken to anyone about it directly, but she did bring up his executive order that he signed on his very first day in office that said the federal civil rights legislation that bans discrimination on the basis of sex also bans anti-LGBTQ discrimination. Here's her exact quote. The anti-discrimination executive order that the president signed is focused on children being able to learn without worrying about whether they will be discriminated against. And this means not being denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. There's going to be no debating this issue. You don't debate with bigots. I really hope you don't have any, well, maybe, what if in your mind about this issue. These people don't have a moral argument to stand on. They don't have a scientific argument to stand on. This is pure 100% religious bigotry. And I hope we're all very clear about this. You know, you might call it name-calling, but I'm really trying to be as specific as I can be when I talk about the current GOP. White supremacist, Christian nationalists, fascists. The Christian component of this is important. I'm sorry. Pretty much all of my family and friends are one kind of Christian or another. I was raised Catholic myself. I have siblings who remain Catholic. I have family that's evangelical. I've got others that are quote unquote spiritual but not religious. I got people all over the map. But most of them are religious in one way or another. So I'm sorry if you find offense in my description of the current right-wing, dangerous cult that was once the Republican Party. It's steeped in white supremacy. It's steeped in religious bigotry. And if we're not all really clear about that, then they can slide this kind of crap into mainstream politics and get away with it. No, I'm not having this. No, I'm not having this at all. Reading again from the article. While Republicans believe that transgender girls and women participating in school sports means that cisgender girls and women will somehow get forced out of those sports, something that hasn't happened even though many states already allow transgender people to play in sports as their gender, advocates of equality say that these bills are really about discrimination. Well, of course they are. Claiming that being assigned male at birth makes one constrained to the category of man and the so-called biology of maleness for their entire lives is tantamount to erasing the embodied and lived experience of trans people. A woman who is trans is a woman, and all the science we have demonstrates that not affirming trans and gender-expansive kids in who they are results in catastrophic mental health consequences, including devastating rates of suicide. That ACLU's Chase Strangio. So if you have any doubt in your mind about where you stand on this, please know two things. A, I, for one, your favorite radio host, is 100% settled on this issue. And B, there is quality information right at your fingertips. Go to any reputable source. And as I said before, the science is clear on this issue. Any credible moral code will also take you to the same place. Only bigotry, pure, old-fashioned, John Birch Society, KKK bigotry can justify discrimination against trans women and girls. Now, of course, I've been talking about girls and women. Trans men and boys, of course, have their own issues, some of them similar, overlapping. But this current debate, I put in quotes, is about trans girls and sports. And it's very kind of weirdly specific. And it's especially egregious. And the arguments on that side of the aisle, the Tuberville arguments, nothing but hate and bigotry. That's all it is. Pure 100%. And the fact that Joe Manchin crossed the aisle to vote with him, what are we going to do about this guy? Lord. You know, he uses the word Democrat as an adjective. You and I have talked about this many times. It's an old story. It's been around for decades about how Republicans use the noun Democrat as an adjective, as in the Democrat Party. No, it's the Democratic Party. But they intentionally misspeak because it's a little dig every time. It just sounds kind of, Democrat, bureaucrat, you dirty rat. It's the dirty rat party. And of course, they hate the notion of democracy, so they don't want to imply that Democrats are democratic. No, it's the Democrat Party. This Democrat initiative that's been proposed. All the Republicans do it. Everybody does it now. It used to be just sort of the snarky, hardcore ones. Now everybody does it. And damned if Joe Manchin doesn't do it. I went back and listened to a couple of his. I heard that he was on some Sunday shows. So I went back in preparation for yesterday's show and took a look at these interviews. And damned if he doesn't do it. He's the only Democrat. He's the only Democratic senator, office holder I've ever heard who uses the term Democrat as an adjective, which is by its very design an insult, a dig. This guy is unbelievable. Hey, let's get out of the Senate. Well, before we leave the Senate, Roy Blunt has announced he's not running for re-election here in 2022. Now, there's not much of a chance that a Democrat could take an open seat in Missouri, but, you never say never. Cori Bush is from St. Louis. She probably couldn't win statewide election, but who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Because, of course, the Orange Menace is going to get involved, and he's going to handpick the Senate nominee for that open seat in 22. It's just entirely up to him. Whoever he chooses will get the nomination. That's the world we live in right now. So there's a maybe more than even chance that he'll endorse a wildly unfit candidate. Someone who might well struggle to keep that Republican seat in a very red state. I'm not going to give up at this early stage because this is something we can be pretty certain about. The Republican candidate for that open Senate seat in Missouri will be a wild-eyed Trumpster. This we can depend on. So my advice, being consistent with my philosophy I've been sharing with you now for a few months, run a progressive. Don't run a mealy-mouthed centrist who's going to try to appeal to Trump voters. Oh my God, that is no way to go. Run a bold, clear-eyed, progressive candidate, adult, competent, accomplished, and put them up head to head. We just can't lose faith in the voters. We can't. We have to at some point rely on the voters. And then Missouri. Oh, my friends in Missouri, please find yourself a Stacey Abrams. Every state needs to have 1 or 2 or 10 Stacey Abrams working diligently night and day to get out the message, to get out the vote, to fight against voter suppression. Stacey Abrams has been a miracle worker in Georgia. Oh, God, her work just continues. Georgia I think just yesterday, was it just yesterday? They passed more voter suppression laws. But Missouri, you got plenty of time now. Blunt has made his announcement. I'm not giving up on that seat. Roy Blunt, of course, a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, part of the leadership team. There's nothing not conservative about him, but he's not a crazy GOP, QAnon, Trump-sucking pig, which you have to be now to win any GOP elections. Not to be confused, by the way, with Roy Blunt Jr., who we all love. You know Roy Blunt Jr., right? He's a writer, humorist. You may have heard him on NPR. He does one of those weekend funny shows. Wait, don't tell me. That's it. Wait, don't tell me. That's the name of the show. It's kind of funny. It's sort of NPR funny. But Roy Blunt Jr., he's been around for a long time. I'm not sure where he's from. He's got a nice little southern accent, very pleasant. And he's kind of intellectual and esoteric and down to earth all at the same time. He's tailor-made for NPR. So we still love Roy Blunt Jr., the writer. I wonder if they're related. No. Well, they spell their names differently. Roy Blunt Jr., the writer, Blount. Senator Roy Blunt, Blunt. Of course, that doesn't mean anything. Names change. Spellings change over the years. Wouldn't be at all surprised if they're related. I bet they are. Well, let's see here. We mentioned this just in passing, I think, yesterday. And that is what's happening at the southern border. Here's another case where, kind of like the transgender women issue, where Republicans might be picking off some centrists, some people who don't really follow the news. They might have a convincing argument, or at least what sounds like a convincing argument, until you just really look into it. Because we have to all acknowledge that the Orange Menace, his policies at the southern border, worked to reduce illegal immigration. Not illegal immigrants, let me be clear. There's no such thing as an illegal person. I never use that language. Yes, I'm being politically correct. I think it's important to use inclusive language and not language that is inherently bigoted. And when you say illegal immigrant, you are calling a person illegal. And there is oftentimes a wide chasm between what is legal and what is moral. So we don't want to get into that. And we don't want to let careless language normalize abhorrent ideas. There's my little sidelight there. So I never, ever use illegal to describe a person. And I ask you to do the same. All right, back to the point here. Orange Menace policies worked like a charm. The numbers of folks trying to enter the United States, one way or another, is up. Especially unaccompanied kids. Kids alone without their parents. The numbers are through the roof just in the last couple of weeks. So that's all true. But here's what we have to keep in mind. Orange Menace policies worked, but at what cost? You could line the entire border with guys armed with machetes just hacking at every person who approached. That would work too. Stephen Miller wouldn't even do that. Well, I don't know. The point is, Orange Menace policies were cruel. They were designed to be cruel. They were designed to scare people away, and it worked. Yeah, if you try to legally claim refugee status, we're not only not going to hear your case, we're going to steal your children, we're going to separate your family, we're going to force you to live in tent villages across the border for months, years at a time. We're going to keep your children and deport you, or keep you and deport your children. I mean, this was all by design. It was supposed to be cruel. It was supposed to frighten people. It was supposed to scare them off as a deterrent from seeking their own human rights, and that is the right to petition for asylum. It's a human right. So, yeah, his policies worked. But there's an old-fashioned phrase, end justifying the means. So, of course, Joe Biden had to put an end to these horrible, cruel policies. And in a very predictable fashion, migrants and asylum seekers get word that there's a new sheriff in town. We've seen the pictures. The T-shirts they're wearing, have you seen these? Joe Biden let us in. There's new hope. And there should be for legitimate asylum seekers. People on the left, my own people, are criticizing Joe Biden for reopening the quote-unquote cages. They've explained to my satisfaction the reason for that. Temporary holding centers. What are you going to do when thousands of kids show up at the border? You got to put them somewhere. And instead of holding them for 6 months or a year, separated from their families, or deported just completely on their own, no, they're holding them for the least amount of time possible. And from what I've been able to discern, they're keeping it under that 72-hour threshold. Because you don't keep a kid in a cage. You hold them to keep them safe. You get them processed. You know where they're going so you can keep track of them so you don't lose them, which the previous administration did. So yes, there is definitely a situation currently at the southern border. Right-wing media and politicians are using it to exploit their own political ends, to display their bigotry against people of color, to instill fear in their constituents about how these dirty immigrants, these dirty illegals, are coming in and bringing COVID and they're going to rape your children and take your job and you know the whole spiel. So they're very happily wallowing in that crap. And here again, the uninitiated, the uninformed, the middle-of-the-road straddlers, they might think, maybe the Republicans have a good point here. No, they don't. I'm here to bring clarity today. They don't have a point. They're f***ing bigots. Until somehow Congress can come up with some real comprehensive immigration reform, Joe is stuck with the current situation. And he has no choice but to do exactly what he's doing. He's getting as many resources down there as he can. He's employed FEMA to assist in the efforts, trying to get these families and these kids processed as quickly as possible, find them a place to be safe in the country. No reason we can't do it. It's a big country. Get them back for their hearings. When the Republicans tell you that 99% of them disappear forever, that's just a lie. You got to remember, they have no trouble lying to you, looking you right in the eye and telling you a blatant lie. Well, that's one of them. It's not true that they don't come back. A small percentage of them, yes, a couple 3% don't come back. The rest of them do. So it's just a matter of resources. Joe Biden has emphasized the long-term solution of serious aid and assistance to places like Guatemala and El Salvador, where these kids are coming from. They're fleeing oppression, violence, human trafficking. The situation is so bad that parents are sending the kids by themselves, knowing that they've got a better chance with Joe Biden than they do in their own native village. Now, if you ask me, that's the way I want people to look at this country. I much prefer that to the previous administration. Well, our lives are in danger here, but they might even be more in danger in America, so we better not go with the Orange Menace as president. Again, a policy that works, but I don't want my country to lock the gates against people in need and have suffering people take their chances knowing that we can't be counted on. No, I'd much rather live in Joe's country. I'm singing Joe's praises today. He understands the moral imperative to do what we can as a nation to help people in need. Now, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take resources, more resources than we currently have. There is a challenge at the border. They're having this big fight over semantics. Is it a crisis or is it a challenge? The talking head will earnestly ask their guest. And depending on what side of the aisle, it's either a crisis or a challenge. Well, we don't need that bullshit. Whatever you call it, it's a problem that needs to be dealt with. Now, let me take Joe's seat in the Oval Office for a minute. I would use whatever power I have to just get all hands on deck. We get lawyers, we get judges, we get social workers, we get the Army Corps of Engineers down there to build a bunch of temporary courthouses. We process these people as quickly as possible. We help them. If they have no case, if they have no standing, fine, let the law decide. But granting asylum is something this country used to do. It's something that every damn nation on earth does. They accept refugees. The Orange Menace cut our annual refugee acceptance to a tiny fraction of what it had been. It's just something that the world does. Every country does it. We used to do it. There's no reason we can't do it. There's nothing unusual about it. You allow people to go to safe housing. They usually always have some sort of relative in the States they can stay with. They come back for their hearing. It's all legal. It's all standard. It's all been done before. We're not inventing anything new here. And whether we incentivize or disincentivize new immigrants, it should be based on the truth. If you're here on a bogus claim, you can still be denied. Let the facts decide. And we live up to our promise to the rest of the world to be a decent, civilized nation. For God's sakes, if we can't take refugees, if we can't grant asylum once in a while, what are we? Except, of course, what the GOP wants us to be, a white, supremacist, Christian, fascist nation. Nope, that's not what we are, and that's not what we're going to be. So if and when you hear stories about the southern border and the so-called crisis, yeah, I'm the very first one to admit there's a problem down there. And the numbers are through the roof compared to what they were just a couple of weeks ago. Yes, that's absolutely true. And yes, it's absolutely true that the Orange Menace policies worked to keep people away, to keep them frightened and scared and in danger. But they weren't bothering us at our border because they were going to be treated worse by the Orange Menace, and they knew it. So, anyway, that's my feeling on the southern border. The tide down there, it ebbs and it flows depending on current conditions, this time caused by a change of administration. Totally understandable, totally predictable. We just need resources, and we need a fair, consistent policy. So I'm not saying it's not a problem or even a challenge or even a crisis. Call it what you will. The current situation at the southern border is one that a decent moral nation ought to be able to handle, and we certainly can. And once again, I got to hand it to Joe. In the current situation, he's doing the right thing, and I've got his back. And I just remind you once again, the white supremacist, Christian fascists of this country, sometimes they can talk pretty smooth. They can talk pretty convincingly. Be on your guard. Don't let them get you. That's how they get you, like my father-in-law used to say. That was his favorite expression. That's how they get you. Yeah, that's how they get you. All right. There it is. I love you. Talk to you tomorrow. I'm Charles Purcell.